Hi, I'm Skip Nipper. Welcome to Skip's Corner, the podcast where I tell you about not only Nashville's great baseball history and traditions,
shot to right, a one-hop liner,
but certainly about its past. And you will hear a little bit about its present and future, too.
Yes, he can. It makes the waist-high catch.
There are great stories about Tom Wilson Park, Herschel Greer Stadium, Sulphur Dell, and the players, coaches, and fans who love everything about baseball. And every once in a while, you will get to hear from a special guest who will share their fondness and even passion for the great game.
The high fly ball down the right field corner, going way back, hits a lead-off home run.
I came across this article that I found very interesting. It was published that on October the 6th, 1913, events were being held on the Fisk campus to commemorate the date the Jubilee Singers left for their world tour in 1871. But it was reporting that the faculty played a baseball game against a team of preparatory students from campus, with the game ending in a 3-3 tie. The Fisk Jubilee Singers are famous not only in Nashville but worldwide. They are an African-American a cappella ensemble consisting of students at Fisk, and they were organized in 1871 to tour and raise funds for their college. And their early repertoire consisted mostly of traditional spirituals, but included some songs by Stephen Foster. The original group toured along the Underground Railroad path in the United States and performed in England and Europe. And later, 19th century groups also toured other parts of Europe where they had not been before. But more about them and Jubilee Hall later. But you might be asking, did Fisk have a baseball team? Yes, they did, but they no longer do. They had a baseball team as early as the 1880s with the Fisk University BBC, that's baseball club. Now, they played black colleges and independent teams, and according to an article without too much detail in the Nashville Tennessean in 1882, it simply stated, the A.K. Wards, that was a famous team in Nashville, last year's champions, the article said, will play the Fisk University Club this afternoon on the university grounds. Well, remember that for a bit, the part where it says university grounds. There are later 19th century references to Fisk baseball in 1884, and later in 1896, 98, and in 1899, when the club played teams like Central Tennessee College, the Bellevue Blues, and nearby Roger Williams University. And they played a team called the Nashville Reds. And Meharry Medical College had a team, and they played the Rock City Unions. Now, I found one article for April the 27th, 1895 that read, Fisk Bulldogs defeat Roger Williams University 26-23 on the latter's grounds. So undoubtedly, Roger Williams University had its own field too. Now, none of those articles in the 19th century refer to a certain player, but I was curious to find out if there were any pros who went to Fisk, mainly if they played in the Negro Leagues. I found only 4. So there may have been more, but let me tell you about these from what I have found out. One was very important in the Negro Leagues, more so than the others, but all hold their own place in baseball history as far as I'm concerned. One is Comer Lane Cox. He was born on May the 9th, 1905, and was a native of Athens, Alabama. His family moved to St. Louis, where Cox attended Sumner High School, and then later, he was brought to Nashville to play for Fisk University, where he received a degree in business and starred as the quarterback for the football team. And there's a famous quote in the Pittsburgh Courier reporting one 1930 game that Fisk was playing, and it goes, and the names of Wyatt Slaughter and Comer Cox of St. Louis will go down in Fisk's sports history as the sparkling stars whose touchdown gained for Fisk their most glorious victory. So he must have been a pretty good player, pretty good athlete. as Cox spent 2 seasons in the Negro Leagues as a third baseman and outfielder, first playing for the Nashville Elite Giants in 1930 and the Cleveland Cubs in 1931. Now, there's a connection between those two teams. But at the age of 25, he appeared in 34 games with the Elite Giants, had 43 hits, drove in 13 runs, and hit for a .309 batting average. And the next season with the Cleveland Cubs, he played in 20 games, had 25 hits, and a .325 batting average. That season with Cleveland, Tom Wilson had moved his Elite Giants and renamed them the Cubs and moved them to Cleveland when he signed Satchel Paige, purchased from the cash-strapped Birmingham Black Barons. And Wilson hoped to capitalize on Paige's popularity in the northern city. Well, it did not pan out, and Wilson returned his team to Nashville, where he had built his own ballpark to house the team. After his baseball career, Cox settled in Springfield, Illinois, where he became the director of the Springfield Urban League. He died in Springfield in 1971 at age 66, and in 1976, the city's Comer Cox Park was named in his memory. He was buried without a grave marker at St. Peter's Cemetery in St. Louis, a few miles from his childhood home. The next one is William Clare Halley Harding. He was born on November the 13th, 1904. He was a shortstop in the Negro Leagues from 1926, and he played until 1937. A native of Wichita, Kansas, Harding attended Fisk, Knox College, and Wilberforce University, where he was a standout football quarterback and also a punter. He played professional basketball for the Harlem Wrens and made his Negro League baseball debut in 1926 with the Indianapolis ABCs. He also played for the Detroit Stars, Kansas City Monarchs, Baltimore Black Sox, Chicago Columbia Giants, and in 1937, his last year, for the Philadelphia Stars. And according to Seamheads.com, the premier website for Negro Leagues stats, Harding's first season was his best. He had 102 hits in 72 games, hitting for a .378 average. He played short for most of his career, but moved to second base in his final 2 seasons. And after baseball, Harding was a sports writer and editor for the Los Angeles Tribune and the Los Angeles Sentinel, and was a leading voice in advocating for the Los Angeles Rams and the National Football League to integrate. He died in Chicago in 1967 at the age of 62. The third player from Fisk that I was able to find more information about was William Horace Kindle. That's Kindle. He was born on January the 29th, 1891. And was a Negro Leagues infielder for several years before the founding of the first Negro National League and in its first few seasons. He was born in Mount Pleasant, Tennessee, and attended Fisk. He appears to have played most of his career for the Brooklyn Royal Giants. He also played at least 2 seasons with the Lincoln Giants and 1 season each for the Chicago American Giants and the Indianapolis ABCs. He may have been a manager for one of the teams he played for, but the details could be better. But he had a career .306 batting average in 7 seasons, and he played part of the 1913 season with the West Baden Sprudels, a team near Louisville. He died in November of 1952 in Baltimore, Maryland, at the age of 61. And that brings me to probably the most famous one who had a foundation of Negro Leagues baseball. His name was Frank C. Leland, Leland, was born in 1869, was an American baseball player, field manager, and a club owner in the Negro Leagues. He was born in Memphis and attended Fisk somewhere between 1879 and 1886, but once again, the details are a little sketchy. He began his professional career with the Washington Capital Cities in the 1887 National League of Colored Baseball Clubs, a team that played no league games before the experiment collapsed. And in the book by James A. Riley, the biographical encyclopedia of the Negro Baseball Leagues, published in 1994, he writes, that Leland moved to Chicago and was instrumental in organizing and developing 5 successful baseball teams in that city. In 1888, he organized the Black Amateur Union Baseball Club, which was sponsored by some of Chicago's black businessmen like Harry Elby, Albert Donegan, and W.S. Peters. Leland obtained a lease from the city government to play at Southside Park, a 5,000-seat facility. In 1898, his team went pro and became the Chicago Unions. He played outfield with the Unions in the 1880s. In the first few years, he also worked as the club's umpire and the traveling manager. And in 1901, he merged the Unions and the Columbia Giants to form the Chicago Union Giants to become the top Negro League team in the Midwest. The team changed its name to the Leland Giants in 1905 after his partnership split with W.S. Peters. In 1907, Rube Foster replaced Leland as manager, and Pete Hill and Foster strengthened the club in the field. But Leland remained president of the board of directors for the Leland Giants until he resigned 2 years later in September 1909. While some researchers believe there was a rift between Foster and Leland, newspapers of the day reported that Frank Leland, who used to own the club on his own, sold away rights to a stock company and had little say in the management of the team. While Rube Foster continued to run the Leland Giants Baseball Club, Leland started a new corporation in October of 1909 called Leland's Chicago Giants Baseball Club, or in short, Chicago Giants, opening offices on State Street in Chicago. He signed Bill Lindsay as his first pitcher. Now, the confusion over the Leland name amongst the teams changed as Rube Foster changed the Leland Giants name to the Chicago American Giants, and Leland's team remained the Chicago Giants. Frank C. Leland produced and collaborated with well-known pre-Negro League baseball players like Bill Lindsay, Walter Ball, Harry Buckner, William Horn, George Hopkins, Harry Hyde, William Monroe, George Wright, Harry Moore, Pete Burns, Lewis Reynolds, William Smith, Dangerfield Talbot, Burt Jones, Nathan Harris, Rube Foster, and Andrew Campbell. In his life outside of baseball, Frank Leland served as a clerk in the criminal court, the circuit court, and the board of review. And at one point, he served as a deputy sheriff. He also held a position as a member of the Board of County Commissioners in Cook County in Chicago. And on his death certificate, the undertaker appears to have marked Leland's death as aortic insufficiency due to exhaustion, and he was buried at the Lincoln Cemetery in Chicago. So that's the 4 players, but remember when I told you to hold on to that thought about the Fisk University grounds? Let me take you back 20 years before Fisk played its first baseball game. There was a man named John Dickens who became a trusted umpire after the Civil War, during which he'd spent nearly a year in Confederate prison camps, organized the Cumberlands, a team that hosted a club from Louisville on July the 31st, 1866. And viewed by 2,000 in Nashville, the game was won by the Louisvilles by a score of 39-23. And so where's the connection? Well, the Louisville and Cumberland teams played this game at Fort Gillem, a popular spot in Nashville for baseball. And the significance of Fort Gillem? The fort, named after Alvin C. Gillem, who built it during the Civil War, and it was abandoned by Union troops in 1865 after the end of the war. Then it became the spot for Nashville teams to play baseball. And back to Fisk. The Fisk Free Colored School was started in 1866 in the abandoned former military hospital barracks located on 12th Street. It became Fisk University the next year, and 3 years later, in 1870, Adam K. Spence became the school's principal, and he developed plans to expand and move the school to a larger campus in North Nashville on a site that had been Fort Gillem. And when the Fisk Jubilee Singers toured, they were raising funds for the construction of Jubilee Hall. And where was it built? Where Fort Gillem had been. This is one of many connections, but here's one more. Fisk's baseball team, first formed in the 1880s, played its games near Fort Gillem, not exactly on the spot, but they moved to the closest area to play their games after Jubilee Hall was built, on the Fisk University campus, and many other Nashville and visiting teams played their games there too. So Fisk University, Jubilee Hall, Fisk's baseball team and its players, and the Negro Leagues all have a connection, intertwined with each other, and it gives us another historical foundation to celebrate Nashville baseball.